Hi guys! The shock absorbers or the shocks are one of the most important things for your RC car. Let's see today how to build them, to fill them up with oil, and to make sure you will get the best performance out of your shock. Today we're gonna build the Kyosho MP10 TKI2 shocks, but this technique can work with pretty much all the shocks in the market. It will depend from one model to another, but it's supposed to be pretty much the same. So, the tools we're gonna use: a hobby knife, 1.5 hex screwdriver, flat tip grip, shock shaft grip, 5mm screwdriver, some scissors, of course the shock package, silicone oil, here 600 for the MP10 TKI2 rear shocks, the O-ring grease, a caliper, something to put your shocks in. You can use two wheels together for the buggy, for example. It will work really good. Microfiber clothes, old tire insert. I will show you why in a couple of minutes, and the Dremel for the details.
So let's start with the build. We're gonna take the hobby knife, get the plastics out of the plate. So it's gonna be the bowl cups and the spring cups. So we got the bushings for the caps that we will get out also. We mount them in the caps. So let's check where the hole is, so you can match a pair together, check where the holes are, and so you make sure you have a pair and it will mount on your car. Just have to push the bushing into the cap. If you don't have the aeration caps, just at least purge. Now we're gonna fit the O-rings into the collar. So the collar will adjust the ride height. We just mount the O-rings into the collars. It's pretty easy to do. And we can directly fit them on the shock body. If it's too tight, sometimes you just need to put some shock oil or WD-40 and the motion will be a lot freer. You tight till the end and you do the exact same on the other shock body. Then we take the O-ring grease to get the O-rings ready with the shock cartridge. So we will just get some grease on your finger like that and just grab the O-ring, put some grease on it so it will seal the cartridge and you will have a better seal for the oil. Put the first O-ring in each shock body. Then the first bushing. We push it down a little bit and then we grab the second O-ring, dip it in the grease and then adjust it in the cartridge. And then the other small bushing. Pretty much all the shocks are made the same way, so you're gonna have O-rings and bushings. It depends on the brand of your car. It will be a little bit different from one to another, but basically this step is gonna be pretty much the same: O-ring and bushings. So like I said, every brand is different. With the Kyosho, it's gonna be a C-clips, but if you're working on different brands of shocks, it's gonna be like a nut, and you're gonna have to tighten the nut. But here, let's see how we mount the C-clips. What I usually do is I put the small part of the C-clips into the milling, and then I will press the big part inside. So I just mount it in the small gap that is made on purpose. And then with the 1.5 millimeter screwdriver, I will push the C-clips into the milling. So I just lock the small part into the milling, and then I press the other part in. So then the C-clip should be locked. I do like an eighth of a turn, so it's sure that the whole clips is really into the milling and it's not gonna pop out. And we do the same thing on the other shock. Same method. I just keep my finger on it to make sure it doesn't fly away. With Kyosho we have three clips, so in any case you have an extra, and you should be all set. So now let's talk about bladders or emulsion. This is an extra pair of shocks, so we have both in the package. The reference is IS215, but if you build a TKI 2, you only have the bladders. That's what the drivers recommend. That's what I use personally. So it's the same with the shock pistons. With those shocks will come 5 holes 1.4, the white ones, but in the kit you have the black ones, 5 holes 1.5 millimeter. That's what we will use today, and that's what we'll build the shock with. We'll now press the ball end into the ball caps. Pretty simple with the small grip. You just press it in. And now we fit the pistons on the shock shafts. It's always the same. One washer, the piston, and then a small nut or a screw. We get everything together, and then we grab a special grip, a special tool. It is made on purpose not to damage the shock shafts, so it will lock the shaft, and then you can tighten the nut. Be careful when tightening. It has to be tight so the piston can't spin on the shock shaft, but don't over tight because it can squeeze the piston, and then the motion will not be free in the shock body. So then we'll slide the shock shaft into the shock body. First, put some silicone oil in the O-rings. The grease will do the sealing, but it will be a little bit freer if you put some oil before you get the shaft in. I will slide the shaft in, but follow the thread. So you just spin the shaft like you would tighten it, in the bushings and the O-rings, and then you can do some motions to make sure everything is in place, and then you slide out the shaft and you unscrew this time like that. It won't damage the O-rings and you can save them. You can clean your mess a little bit, get the grease and the oil cleaned out, and then we slide the shafts in the right direction. Same as before, you screw it in, and as soon as the thread is gone, you can push it out, get the grease excess out. We'll now fit the rubber boot, so it's a dust protection. It's really important for the O-ring's life. So this is a rear with the new longer shocks, so the rubber boot has the right length, but if you're on the front ones, for example, you're gonna need to cut it. I have small fingers. I can push the shaft out and it's in place. You see the rubber boot is pretty much sharp with the shaft, so it's okay. But if you're on the front one, the rubber boot is gonna be too long, so grab your scissors, cut the extra piece so it's sharp again, and you're all set. So we get the rubber boot out now. It will be a little bit easier to mount it when the shocks is fully done. We repeat the operation on the second shock the exact same way. We saw that the rubber boot for the rear don't need to be cut, so I won't mount them now. So you grab the grip again, you hold the shaft with it, and you can screw the bolt cap on it. If it's not super easy at the beginning, you can use a body reamer to make the hole a little bit bigger, and it will screw in a lot easier. Just a little bit though, because it has to be still tight. For the length, we're gonna measure with the caliper how much length we put here. As you see, I leave a little bit of thread there. So we grab the caliper and we measure how much we have between the shock body and the bolt cap. For the rear, it's gonna be 44.8, about 45, and for the front, between 35.6 and 35.8. Once again, we do the exact same on the second shock. We check the measure again. It's really important to get the exact same measure if you run 10 scale, but don't play too much with the bolt cap because the thread's gonna be a little bit freer after that. So like I say, 10 scale is super important. You have the same length for both right and left because it will change the droop of your car. But if it's an 8 scale buggy, the droop is going to be set with the screw that comes in contact with the chassis. So it's not a very big deal if you don't have the same value on both shocks. Now we will put the rubber boot. To make it easier, just apply some silicone oil and it will just slide in. It has to be like that on the ball end. That part is really important because it will make the seal perfect and it will avoid the dust to get into the O-rings, and it's the best way to get a consistent seal. Now both of my shocks are ready with the rubber boot on. We can fill them up with oil. If you don't have a shock stand, you can use 2 tires. It will do the same job. We start filling the first shocks about halfway with oil. And then we move the shaft up and down. The objective is to get rid of the air that is stuck under the piston. So we're gonna move right and left, also spin the piston so the air comes out. Then we will go with the second shocks. We do the exact same thing. You can use a pump to get the air out of your shocks quicker. For me, it's not gonna change anything on the shock behavior. It's just that you can build your shocks a bit quicker because the air will get out of the oil quicker. As soon as it's done, you just fill up the shock until it's level with the shock body. So your shock body is full. If you still have some bubbles, we'll wait and get the shock caps ready. So like I said, it's an extra set of shocks, so it's the aeration version. If it's the TKI 2 stock version, you don't have that screw, but it will act exactly the same if you use the screw or just regular caps. You don't need to tighten that screw too much because it's just a 1.5 millimeter head. And that's the part where we're gonna need the tire insert. So you can use the tire insert or a small piece of high density foam in order to keep the bladder in the right way, the right shape. So we're gonna just cut a small amount of insert and put it behind the bladder, so we'll keep the bladder consistent with the same shape, so you can get a little bit more consistent rebound and a little bit more grip. So with the scissors, you cut a small slice and you adjust the right size to fit in the bladder, just between the bladder and the shock cap. So those are the Dash 09 bladders. It's the flat version. If you have the Dash 03, the bigger ones, just cut a little bit bigger piece of foam so it really fill up the volume between the bladder and the shock cap. In this case, the foam is about 3 millimeter thick. So you put the foam and the bladder, and slowly, without cutting the bladder, you just press it with the 1.5 hex so it's really in place and ready for closing the shock. So now we're ready. All the air is gone from the oil. We can take the first shock, first cap. The shaft is fully out. We look for the thread and we start to tighten the cap on the shock. What we're gonna check is the purge hole. So we just look at the hole. As soon as the oil comes out, we're gonna go a little bit slower and tight and untight. So we make sure we don't put too much pressure onto the oil. And we slowly close the cap. But before it's fully closed, we're gonna get the shock shaft in to make sure the volume of the shaft is out of the shock. So the bleeder hole is still leaking, and I will get the shaft in and the oil will still go out. So I just get all the shaft into the shock and hold it. And I wait until there is no more oil coming out from the bleeder hole. And when it's done, I can fully close the cap, still going back and forward a little bit. And I will just lock the cap with the 1.5 millimeter so I have more torque and fully lock the shock. When you go in and out, you shouldn't have any air leak or noise or oil coming out of the shock. So if it's not like that, you do it again. And we do the second shock with the exact same method. You may have heard about the rebound. The rebound is the amount of bounce you're gonna have from the shaft when it's fully into the shock. I like my shocks dead, so that's why when I close the cap, the shaft is fully inside. But if you want more rebound, you just close the cap with the shaft a little bit more outside. The problem of that technique is you're gonna build pressure into the shock, and your shocks might not be as consistent as what it is when it's dead and you have no rebound. So you see here, when I pull, there is no pressure in the shock. It's even coming in a little bit. And when I fully put the shaft in, it's popping out a little bit, but it's just normal. It's from the bladder. Now we're gonna mark the ride height color. We're gonna do a small mark facing the shock cap so we can count the turns when we adjust the ride height. One turn will be 1 millimeter.
Pretty simple, isn't it? Now it's your turn. Build your shocks. Let us know what you think. Bye-bye.